Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We turn now in the Johnson edition to poem 183, I've Heard an Organ Talk Sometime. This is another poem about the power of music and possibly the power of poetic inspiration. Now our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. And I'm hopeful that you've already studied with us the set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've worked through the preceding 182 poems we just finished with, If I Shouldn't Be Alive. Now, one of the arguments that Emily will make, and this is one of the reasons why we love her poetry so much, is that she resurrects so many different types of questions. And one of those questions is the power of music to be, we'll use the term, translinguistic, beyond words, even though she attempts to try to capture so much of this through words. And this will take us back to our study of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We call that playlist at learnstrong.net, Talks with Walt. Here we're Chats with Emily. And we'll finish actually with a poem by Walt Whitman that will bring to mind some of the observations that Emily will make here. She says it this way. I've heard an organ talk sometimes in a cathedral aisle, and understood no word it said, and yet held my breath the while, and risen up and gone away, a more Bernardine girl, yet know not what was done to me in that old chapel aisle. Now notice we go from cathedrals to chapels. I love this echoing that she plays with. And notice the kind of American-like language of I've heard an organ talk sometimes. You remember back in poem 157 with musicians wrestle everywhere, this idea that music has this power that is going to be transcendent in some ways. Notice we're in a cathedral aisle, which is fascinating that the emphasis is on the aisle. It's almost as if, what was she, walking out of the cathedral down the aisle and she heard it, or walking into the cathedral in the aisle? But she'll say, even though she heard the organ talk, she understood no word it said. Again, this translinguistic idea, yet know not what was done to me, she'll finish with, yet, even though I didn't understand what was really going on, it held my breath the while. Now this notion of held my breath will take us to poem 184 next, and the idea of transporting. In other words, this is what great art has a tendency to do. It lifts you up where you are and it moves you to some other place. We've said this again and again in our study of any number of great authors at learnstrong.net. Think about, for example, the way Homer plays the game, Shakespeare plays the game, Dante plays the game, Milton clearly plays the game, Virginia Woolf plays the game. I mean, we've gone on to talk about this is what great art does. And back to Shelley's Defense of Poetry, this is what he said. Remember Potable Gold? This is what he said in Defense of Poetry, what great art does. Here, of course, it's music. She says, and risen up. Now, maybe this is coming up from the pew, down the aisle we go, and gone away. And more a Bernardine girl. This is referencing Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercian monk who taught the simple life as being a way to find God. She says, I've ended up more a Bernardine girl, yet know not what was done to me. It's interesting she says to and not for here, in that old chapel aisle. In other words, I know something happened, and I know I was affected by it. Now remember, this is a woman, a girl she calls herself, who never could quite come full circle to the conversion experience of her upbringing in these cathedrals or chapels where she spent time. I think the point she's making in 2a is that all great art, powerful art, defies explanations, often both for the artist as well as the audience. And I think this is a poem as much about poetic inspiration as it is about musical inspiration. And I think Emily's constantly trying to understand why she's moved by great art and why she believes that her art should move others, possibly even those who might be looking, for example, at her art to publish it or to consider it. At 2B, the rhetoric here, I love the echoes, as in music in the cathedral to the chapel and the like. At 3A, we started this observation a few minutes ago with Whitman. Remember Whitman's music poems? To a certain country jazzy, I heard you solemn sweet pipes of the organ, a Broadway pageant. But I want to remind us, and I'm hopeful that you were with us throughout that study of Talks with Walt. Do you remember this poem, The Singer in the Prison? I love this poem because it speaks as well to the very thing Emily is talking about as well. I find it fascinating that this poem is written in 1869, and we believe that Emily's poem was written in 1860. And of course, there's no talking between the two, and yet the brilliance of the zeitgeist of the time, that time of tremendous, artistic fermentation, as we've talked about it. The Singer in the Prison. O sight of pity, shame, and dole, a fearful thought, a convict soul. Rang the refrain along the hall of the prison, rose to the roof the vaults of heaven above, pouring in floods of melody and tones so pensive, sweet, and strong, that like whereof was never heard, reaching the far-off sentry and the armed guards who ceased their pacing, making the hearers' pulses stop for ecstasy and awe. The sun was low in the west one winter day, when down a narrow aisle, amid the thieves and outlaws of the land, there by the 100-seated, seer-faced murderers, wily counterfeiters, gathered to Sunday church in prison walls, the keepers round, plenteous, well-armed, watching with vigilant eyes. Calmly, a lady walked, holding a little innocent child by either hand, whom, seating on their stools beside her on the platform, she, first preluding with the instrument a low and musical prelude, in voice surpassing all, sang forth a quaint old hymn. A song, a soul, confined by bars and bands, cries, help, oh help, and wrings her hands, blinded her eyes, bleeding her breast, nor pardon finds, nor balm of rest. Ceaseless she paces to and fro, O heart-sick days, O nights of woe, nor hand of friend, nor loving face, nor favor comes, nor word of grace. It was not I that sinned the sin, the ruthless body dragged me in. Though long I strove courageously, the body was too much for me. Dear prison soul, bear up a space, for soon or late the certain grace to set thee free and bear thee home, the heavenly pardoner, death shall come. Convict, no more nor shame nor dole, depart a God-enfranchised soul. The singer ceased. One glance swept from her clear, calm eyes, or all those upturned faces, strange sea of prison faces, 1,000 very crafty, brutal, seamed, and beauteous faces. Then rising, passing back along the narrow aisle between them, while her gown touched them, rustling in the silence, she vanished, with her children in the dusk. While upon all convicts and armed keepers, ere they stirred, convict forgetting prison, keeper his loaded pistol, a hushed pause fell down a wondrous minute. With deep, half-stifled sobs and sound of bad men bowed and moved to weeping, and youth's convulsive breathings, memories of home, the mother's voice in lullaby, the sister's care, the happy childhood, the long-pent spirit roused to reminiscence. A wondrous minute then. But after, in the solitary night, to many, many there, years after, even in the hour of death, the sad refrain, the tune, the voice, the words resumed. The large, calm lady walks the narrow aisle, the wailing melody again. The singer in the prison sings, O sight of pity, shame, and dole, O fearful thought, a convict soil. I love that at the same time in American thought, American history, these two poets, Whitman and Emily, are playing their games, and similar games. It's amazing to me. Finally, in 3B, how are we going to own a poem like this? Well, what was a time that music spoke to you the way that Emily is speaking about it here, and it compelled you, and you were never quite the same afterwards? I hope Emily's poetry is doing that for you. Thank you.